Some drug awareness information, guys. This is important stuff. Some of it is not going to be that great much fun to listen to and hear and see, but I know what he has to say is important, and we need you to be on your very best behavior. So y'all give Chad a round of applause.
So, good afternoon. I got the afternoon after everybody's had lunch, yes? That's the hardest time to talk because everybody's full and you're tired. But guys, today I want to talk to you about something very, very important. And let me kind of explain first of all what I do. So I'm a paramedic by trade, so I take care of sick people. I work not only on the ambulance in Lubbock, the training chief, so we have 155 paramedics on staff, but I also work at AeroCare as a paramedic, so I fly on the helicopter and the jet as well. But guys, in the city limits of Lubbock, let me explain to you guys, some of my job title is part of it is death notifications. And is what I have to do is when somebody dies, a lot of times I will have to go and talk to the family and tell them that their loved one's dead. And is what I've had to do lately, especially over the last probably 3 to 4 to 5 years, I've had more and more kids your age and high school and college kids that are dying from drugs that they're using. And so it's not fair for me to complain to go, man, I really hate this part of my job, because I do. I really hate that part of my job. But it's not fair unless I'm willing to try to fix it. And so I want to talk to you guys today about vaping and about drugs and kind of what we're seeing. Now, I grew up in a smaller town, smaller than Muleshoe, Texas, a lot smaller than Muleshoe, Texas. So I kind of understand what happens in smaller towns because there's not always something to do. And so you end up out places where you probably shouldn't be sometimes. And sometimes people's friends may come in or cousins may come in from a big city and they may bring stuff with them. And you guys may get curious to what is that and how is that? So I know for fact that you guys vape. And I'm not saying all of you do, but I'm saying some of you do. And I want to talk to you the health effects of that today because I've talked to your principals and I've talked to the superintendent. I know what's getting pulled out of the schools. But the funny thing, it's really not that funny though. But I got a call this weekend from a school not far from here with a young man that died just last week from a drug overdose at school. At school. And so I want to visit with you guys about that because none of you are old enough to buy a vape from a vape shop. And so where are you getting it from? You may be getting it from upperclassmen. You may be getting it from drug dealers in town. And so you don't know what these people are selling you. You may think you're buying one thing, but yet another thing. And I want to show you that today. So a lot of people see drugs as this. They see it as a good time. They see it as that they're having fun, that they're partying. But let me show you how I see drugs. I see them as another 10 overdoses that are dead every week. I see them that more and more people we're finding unresponsive in alleyways or in their house. But this is what's been happening more and more is I'm seeing young people that have breathing tubes in their throat. And I got a call just this morning from a school, from a young man from this morning that has a breathing tube now in his throat from a drug overdose at school. And so it's real. Now this young lady, this is a mom, and she's saying goodbye to her son for the last time because he's brain dead from one hit of a drug. So guys, in doing that, I want to talk about Connor Moore here in just a little bit, okay? So a drug, just so everybody understands, is any substance that you put into your body, that you inhale, you inject, you smoke, you put it underneath your skin, you absorb into your skin, you put it underneath your tongue, or you take a pill form. And anything that you put into your body that alters the way your body reacts, whether my heart rate goes up, my blood pressure goes up, or my blood pressure goes down, or the way I think or the decisions I make. And that's what a drug is anything that affects those things. So as you can see, more and more kids across the United States right now are trying. 3.6 million kids, students, are now trying vape on a regular basis yearly. Guys, that's a lot, because I want to talk about the health effects and what that does. In 2020, the CDC came out and said they estimated that almost 40% of high schoolers and about 20% of middle school kids were regularly vaping on a regular basis. That's not just trying, that's regular. Now, I would venture to say that that number is probably higher than 20%. I bet you there's more than that, and there may be more than that in this school. But I want to talk about what vape is. So vape juice, that's the problem. That's a lot of the big issue. So it's 90% VG and PG, okay? Is what that is that's vegetable oil. That's the equivalent of food-grade vegetable oil. That's what your grandma fries chicken in. It has glycerin in it. And you're thinking, yuck, that's pretty gross. Well, guess what? That's okay for us to eat some of that. Not a lot, but a little bit. But guys, it's not safe for your lungs. Only 10% of the juice is actually nicotine or a drug. Therefore, they're absorbing that in. You're absorbing that into your lungs, and that becomes a big issue. So what are the health effects of this? A lot of the studies show that vaping at a young age starts to affect my memory, my concentration, learning, self-control, attention span, and my mood. And that affects how you guys learn. You guys are to the age where you guys are absorbing everything that you're learning very, very fast, and your brain is growing very rapidly. But tobacco will slow that down. If it's even just tobacco, it will start to slow those processes down. So this is some 4D imaging. This is brand new imaging that's becoming available to us. And then at the far left is a healthy brain. And that's the top side of a healthy brain. On the bottom, on the next right one to that is the healthy underside of the brain by 4D imaging. So it looks good, it's solid. And yes, there are a couple of very, very small holes where those are the ventricles in the brain on the right-hand side. But this kid is 17 years old, he's used marijuana for 4 years, and look how bad his brain looks. From marijuana use only by vaping. Then we start to look at cigarette smokes. 4 years at 22 years old, look at the holes. 6 years with opioids at the bottom, 38 years old, big holes. Cocaine, great big holes. Alcoholism over 10 years, almost devastating to the brain. And then 3 years of methamphetamine, big holes. Guys, we've got to understand something. Our brain does not regenerate. When there is a problem, and when we get a hole in our head, when we get a hole in our brain from this imaging, it doesn't fix itself if I stop today. Those holes are permanently there. And so I've lost that portion of my brain. And so that's one health effect that we see on a regular basis. So let's listen to what happens here. Is whenever they have, say, an autopsy, somebody dies outside the hospital, they have to do an autopsy. And so I was sharing this with an upperclassman this morning. And guys, they called me and said, hey, can you come out? We need you to come to the ME's office and take a look at this autopsy that they've done. And so I did, and we had ran on this gentleman earlier, and he was in severe respiratory distress. We put him on something called CPAP, where it forces air in. They got him to the hospital, and he still wasn't breathing. Therefore, they had to go ahead and put a breathing tube in and put him on a jet ventilator. In doing that, he still did not improve and ended up passing away. So we went over there, and we talk about the VG and PG because that's going to be important. But guys, whenever I looked at his lungs and we picked up his lungs, they were literally dripping with oil in them. And that's why he couldn't breathe, is because he had so much of that VG and PG in his body. And you're going to hear some kids today talk about their story about having the glycerin.
6 people have died and hundreds more have gotten sick because of a vaping-related lung illness. Well, tonight, we're talking to a man who used his vape every day from the time he was 15 until, by the age of 21, he had 2 collapsed lungs. He tells Contact 7 investigator David Clue, you should not trust the claim that vaping is a safe alternative to smoking.
I would always argue how safe it was until it took effect on me.
1 year ago, the self-proclaimed vaping fanatic suffered a collapsed left lung.
At this time, I didn't think vaping had anything to do with it.
That's a chest tube in his lungs.
So I didn't stop.
No, he did not.
I liked the clouds, the nicotine.
Then this summer, his love of vaping collapsed, along with his right lung.
My chest just got really tight, and then I felt a sharp pain come through my back up to my chest.
His choice of whether to quit had been flanked by his addiction.
Now I believe it's vaping because it's the only thing I'm doing.
His 6 days in the hospital costing his family thousands and costing him 30% of that right lung. A smoker gets the benefit of years of coughing, loss of taste and smell, warnings that something worse is on the horizon. But for vapors like Kyle, symptoms don't include a heads up, and we could be years from understanding why.
Until we know a lot more information about exactly what ingredient is in the vape juice that's causing these deaths or serious illnesses, the best advice is to stay away from vaping.
That's terrible news for the vaping industry, still untested, unregulated, and now under tremendous scrutiny. Still, 40% of Denver teens have tried vaping, and half of those were still vaping this month. Kyle Lano sees that kind of statistic and pictures an entire generation clouded by false claims and fancy flavors, only to see the true cost coming into focus far too late.
We have our whole lives ahead of us, and we're going to end up on oxygen in our 20s, 30s.
So guys, he lost 30% of his right lung. You see those tubes. So what happened is his lung collapsed because it got so weak from the vape juice. And so what we have to do is we have to go in and cut a hole into the rib cage, and we put our finger in there, and then we put a chest tube in to help that lung re-expand. He lost 30% of his lung at the age of 21 from about 5 or 6 years of vaping. So it becomes a very, very big problem. So this is what we were talking about earlier. You know, remember when Grandma would make fried chicken with the oil, and we had to go and help her clean it up, and you have all the little spackle that comes out, and that oil gets congealed whenever it gets around the pan and it starts to cool off. This is what happens in our lungs. This is the sludge that we talk about that starts to build up in the bronchioles and then in the alveolar sacs. So our air sacs in our lungs that receive oxygen and blood, is what they do is that vape juice gets hot. And when it gets in there, it starts to cook those. And it causes what we call popcorn lunging. So this young man is 16 years old at the top, and this is a 3D CT scan. And you can see there's starting to be white blebs in there. And that's what we call popcorn lunging, because the air sacs in there are starting to pop. And therefore the air gets out of where it should be and into these small areas. But at the age of 16, he said, you know what? I'm smarter than the physician. I'm going to keep on vaping. And a year later, he was in severe respiratory distress. And this is what happened to him on the bottom. As you can see on the left, your right-hand side, but that's actually his left lung is completely collapsed in the middle. So let's see what happened to him.
As of last week, over 2,000 cases were reported to CDC. Close to 40 deaths were confirmed from lung failure related to this injury. It's a senseless disease process, totally preventable death. And our teenage patient would have faced certain death if it weren't for the lung transplant.
Working with the lung transplant team, we worked to get him on the lung transplant list within a week, and on October 15th, he had successful bilateral lung transplant. The patient is recovering well. It takes months to recover fully recover from bilateral lung transplant. Within 2 weeks, he was off the ventilator and starting to work with our physical therapy team, starting to walk again and slowly regaining his strength.
So he ended up having to have a lung transplant. His lungs completely shut down, and he had to get a transplant in order to stay alive. So in order to do that, somebody has to donate their lungs when they die. And hopefully it's somebody that's younger, like a car accident. That's what happens a lot of times. And then they take those lungs and they put them into his body. Now, they're not his lungs, so the body says, you know what, I don't want these. So he has to take 4 to 6 pills every day in order to keep his body from rejecting those lungs that are keeping him alive at this point. So this is just one of the things that happens with this. Listen to this young man.
It's an unnerving scene. The body of a teen spasming in a coughing fit on a ventilator just to breathe.
It just progressively got worse extremely fast.
17-year-old Tristan Zofield was taken to Cook Children's Hospital in Fort Worth, Texas, with blockage in his lungs.
I woke up just throwing up everywhere. My heart was just pounding out of my chest, going 100 miles an hour.
And doctors believe it was all because of vaping.
He's a very sick, otherwise healthy-looking child. And we don't see previously healthy 17-year-olds that sick that quickly.
In late
late July, Tristan's family sat by his side day after day, not knowing what was wrong, as he lay in a medically induced coma.
We were baffled at first. We had no idea what was going on.
His parents then learned Tristan had been vaping without their knowledge since the 8th grade, sometimes as many as 2 to 3 vape pods a week.
You don't want your child to have to go through what we went through to get to the point that he came to.
And this isn't the first teen hospitalized after vaping use. The CDC has identified 153 cases of severe lung illness associated with e-cigarette use across 16 states. The CDC continues to investigate and has not identified a particular device or liquid as being associated with those cases. For Tristan, he's now hoping to warn other teens.
It's a big deal. It's not something to look over.
So as you can see, his lungs actually stopped working. They got clogged up from the VG and PG, the vegetable oil, and so they stopped working. He was unable to move air, so therefore they had to put the breathing tube in and put him to sleep in order to provide oxygen for him. Okay, so let's listen to this young lady.
I thought vaping was fine. I did all the tricks all the time.
A month ago, you'd find Maddie vaping every day, posting pictures and video on social media.
I used all sorts of different products, like from all sorts of vape shops across Utah County, and I used Naked Juice, all sorts of name brand juices.
Products with either no nicotine or a lower dose of nicotine. Today, these are her pictures on social media instead, in a medically induced coma in the hospital.
The doctors said that it was definitely from vaping.
Maddie says she became mysteriously ill in late July.
My temperature was so high, my brain just completely shut off. But I thought I was in the Payson Hospital for one night, and I was actually there for 4 days.
From there, she says she ended up at Timpanogos Regional Hospital in the ICU for 3 days. Doctors would figure out
I had fat particles growing inside my lungs that were related to the glycerin in vape juice. So and then my lungs were full of fluid, and they said that my chest x-rays was one of the worst that they've ever seen.
How they explained it to her family.
When you inhale the moisture, that is just creating the perfect environment for bacteria to grow inside your lungs and for infection to start, and that is basically what happened.
It's similar to what the Utah Department of Health has been reporting. Nearly 24 cases of teens and young adults with severe lung disease in Utah. All the cases, just like Maddie, ended with severe illness and hospitalization.
My family seriously thought that I had passed away, and when I found that out, it just made me so sad.
A few weeks later, you can see Maddie is doing much better, though.
It's very scary because the doctors don't know the long-term effects of this, so they don't know what the healing process is even supposed to be like.
Maddie still needs to use oxygen at night, but she doesn't need this.
After going through that, I would never touch a vape again.
And so you're hearing, I mean, you hear me tell about it, but you're hearing true stories from kids that are not much older than you that have been vaping from about the time that you started, or about the time that you guys are right now. They started then, and then now they're already having lung issues, some of those being major. So as we take a look at the lungs, this is normal lungs. This was actually Maddie's lungs right there. And so they are in very, very bad shape. And again, like she said, we don't know long term. It's kind of like COVID. We don't know what these lungs are going to look like over a period of time. And so that can definitely be a great big issue. So I'm going to move and start talking about some drugs now, because we're seeing more and more drugs being put into vape. And so in doing that, marijuana being one of the biggest ones, if people were to start in junior high school, they have about a 6-fold increase if they use weed on a regular basis of having psychiatric issues. And from a driving standpoint, once you begin to drive, you have about a 2-fold increase of having a chance of having a fatal accident, whether that kills you or that kills an innocent family that you have hit while you were under the influence. So if you look at the number of kids we have in this room, by the statistics, national statistics, one of you in this room will not finish high school because of a drug-related incident. That's sad. One of you, so look around, one of you may not graduate because of a drug-related incident. And guys, this all starts because right now, you've got to think about it. Again, you guys are not old enough to buy a vape. Therefore, where are you getting it from? And what are they putting into these vapes? So we go back to some of our imaging. What does marijuana do to our brain? This is a healthy 4D image of a 16-year-old. And on the right-hand side, you can see a 16-year-old daily user, and it's got large holes into the brain. And again, the brain does not heal itself. So therefore, it is going to remain with these holes for the rest of his life, and he loses that function of his brain. So the brain, again, has a lot of different aspects. Once weed starts to get into the system, where you start to have lack of trust, concentration issues, problems with school, and then you get addictive personality, which makes you just want to try other things. So this is what we call earwax or honey butter. This is what is in the vape juice. This is the weed that they put in. It is very, very strong. It's about 4 times stronger than a joint. And that is why we're seeing, that is why we're seeing so many big holes in young kids on the 4D imaging, is from the weed being so concentrated that the kids are taking these days. We also talk about methamphetamines. We have found methamphetamines in junior high schools in vape. Again, a drug dealer is selling you something to try to get you to come back. You don't know exactly what might be in it. So this is a meth lab that was busted in Lubbock. As you can see, it's really clean. It is made with battery acid, drain cleaner, lantern fuel, antifreeze. They need something very acidic. So what does that do to my body? Well, this is something that we call meth mouth. It begins to rot the teeth and rot the mouth out. And if you will look right here, guys, those are maggots that are growing in the roof of somebody's mouth from methamphetamines. So it also affects my body, and it makes me look really bad. And so, you know, being in high school and junior high school, you want to make sure that you look pretty good, because we're all, you guys are all possibly still looking for somebody to date at some point, especially when you get a little bit older. And this is what methamphetamines does to people's body. And so it begins to break their body down very, very fast, and they really can't keep up. So we talk about sedatives, we talk about date rape drugs. Guys, this is a big deal, and people don't think. Because again, guys, I grew up in a smaller town. We would go out in the country and hang out. Well, guys, when that happens, there are bad people that want to hurt you. And so if you go somewhere that you probably are not supposed to be going, if you get a drink, keep your drink, carry your drink. Don't set your drink down. If you do, go get a different drink. Guys, is what happens is they put these drugs into your drink. They pour just a very tiny little bit in, and you have absolutely no memory for the next 3 hours of what has happened to you, nor any control over your body. And so we see a lot of problems with that. Cheese is another big thing that we've seen with drug dealers given out at schools, and this is Tylenol or acetaminophen with heroin in it. And heroin is an opioid, and it's a very, very strong opioid. And what it does is it gets you addicted very, very quickly. So if the drug dealer hands it out for free and you were to try that vape, there is a very good chance you would be highly addicted, and you would have to keep coming back for that on a regular basis. And so this has been another great big problem. So I'm going to finish up today with synthetics, because synthetics has been a great big problem. Synthetics is any grass, weed from out in your yard, plants. They'll take those and they spray them with different chemicals. And that chemical decides what that drug is going to do. In doing that, it again causes a lot of different problems. The problem with it is it's kind of like Russian roulette. We don't ever know what one body's going to do versus another body. This young man is on a hallucinogen. As you can see, this hallucinogen, this is a synthetic drug. We don't know what is going to happen to each person's body. And you can see he thinks he has bugs. And guys, I'm not going to lie, it's kind of funny. When we pull up in the ambulance and I see this, you're kind of going, oh, he's on something big. And so that's what happens with this process. This is sold as potpourri. It is not for human consumption. We don't know what it does. And a lot of times it affects people in different ways. What it may do to one person versus do to another person is totally different. And then they get a new pack of drugs, and you don't ever know what exactly is going to happen with this. When we look at this, this is one of the big problems. This is the packages. We see Spice, K2, Space Diamond, and Scooby Snacks are kind of the big hitters. But remember the young lady that I showed you laying over top of this young kid? This is Connor, and Connor's a 19-year-old male. He was a track star. And he went to college, and his parents confirmed and his friends confirmed he had never ever used drugs in high school. He got to college and he wanted to try something, so he tried a synthetic drug. In doing that, He tried it one time. His friends all confirmed this was one hit of one drug. He is brain dead. That picture you saw earlier was his mom telling him goodbye for the last time because they were about to pull him off of life support. That is the hard thing about this, is they cause seizures, and we don't know always what is in the drug. We don't always know what's in the pack. And then on top of that, we don't know how your body's going to react to it versus somebody else's body react to it. So let's watch this video. This is going to be pretty hard to watch. This young man just took a hit of a drug called Spice. And he's passed the pipe over to his friend. And his friend is now going to light up and begin to get high. So you have the same drug at the same time, the same route, two different people. So he begins to get high. And when you breathe this in, it goes straight into the bloodstream, and it goes straight into the body. And then people get extremely high very, very fast. And you can see by the look on his face, and some of you, this may be the first time you've ever seen somebody high, but the friend that started it is now starting to have seizures. And he starts to throw up. And he falls back because his body is seizing. And what happens is your brain is violently shaking inside. And he begins to have a seizure. Now, nobody's calling 911 because that's what drug friends do. They think this is funny. But the problem with it is, even if they had called 911, a lot of times these drugs are so big, the drugs on my truck aren't big enough to stop them. So right now, this is what we call Decorticate Posturing. So his arms are back, flexed out. He's been without oxygen. He's not breathing during his seizure. He continues to throw up. And now his hands start to come into the cord. This is what we call Decorticate Posture. So this tells us that he's having a severe brain reaction at this point as his brain's continuing to seize and he's not breathing. Again, nobody's called 911. But even if we were there, the chances of stopping this has not been really good. So the camera's going to kind of pan around and he continues to vomit. He's not breathing. As you can see, his face is becoming extremely purple. And that's lack of oxygen. And this is one hit of one drug. Same drug that his friend took at the same time. He did not do so well. And his arms are going to start to relax. And I want to stop the video right there because this young man dies in this video from one hit of one drug. Was this his first time? Probably not. He's got his own pipe. But that's what's to say is you don't know what is in these drugs. You don't know how your body's going to react to it. When you look at the statistics, one of you guys will not graduate because of a drug incident. None of you can buy a vape. So where are you getting it from? What are they putting in it? You don't know. It could be a synthetic, can be vape now. This could be one of you guys. I could be getting a call from a principal saying, we had one not make it. Like I got just this last week. Guys, when you look at it, 80% of the time when people get high, they do it with their friends. So you have the ability now, you know in the group who's vaping. I'm sure probably the principal's got a good idea who's vaping because she's probably picked some up from you guys, your teachers. There's no doubt that there's vaping going on at this age group. But guys, I've shown you the medical portion. I've shown you how dangerous this is. You have the ability to stop now before you get addicted. if you want help, your principal, your teachers, your counselors, your pastor, your parents, there's ways to get off of this. There's ways to stop before it progresses into bigger drugs or somebody slips you something that you did not know what was in it that could result in death. Guys, you guys know each other. Your teachers, your parents are not always going to be there. But statistically, one of you will be with each other when you do a drug, whether it be tobacco or weed or methamphetamines or crank or crack or white horse or whatever it may be, synthetic. Guys, you have the ability to help each other. So if you have a friend that's vaping, hold them accountable. Help them get off. Help them stop before it becomes a problem. And guys, it could be, hey, I'm just using it for the flavor. Guys, that doesn't eliminate the VG and PG that's going into your lungs every time you take a breath. Guys, I hope the best for you all. I hope you have a great school year. Thank you all so much for having me.